need to make sure you're studying throughout this part, making sure we get this figured out in the next few days. That way, when we take our test next Tuesday, you're getting an A or a B, or at least the best you can do, because this is the one that you need to do your best on. Okay? Find f minus g of x. So if I'm doing f minus g of x, Christina, what am I going to do? That's what I'm going to do here. Good. Okay. So you're good. F minus g. So she said write down the f, write down the g. We're subtracting. And what do I need to do with that second part there? Distribute the negative. That negative needs to go to both things. I have to put it in parentheses because I'm distributing that negative to both things. So then my problem becomes 4x minus 6 minus 4x minus 2. Then it's just a matter of combining like terms. The biggest thing we did on our test is we made random equal signs. There's no equal sign in this problem. All you're doing is combining like terms. 4x and negative 4x. What happens when you put those two together? They cancel each other out. And then negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8. Done. Don't put a random equal sign. If there's not an equal sign, don't throw it in there. That was our biggest mistake when we took the test. F, open circle, g of x. When you see the open circle, Kyron, what is that telling us to do? Plug it in. Which equation are we starting with? You take g, because it's the first part, and he's going to plug that in to f, where that x was. So his new problem is 4 something minus 6. Where that x was now, he's replacing it with 4x plus 2. He's taking that g equation and plugging it in. Okay, once you've done that, Michael, what are we going to do next? Distribute. Good. So 16x plus 8 minus 6, 16x plus 2. Questions on there? Next one, number 2, says find h of f of 1. Find h of f of 1. Jorge, if I'm finding h of f of 1, what am I going to do? Plug in 1 into which equation? Which one? F of x. He's taking 1 and plugging it in right there. So he's taking 1 and plugging it in. So it's going to say the square root of 10 minus 1. So the square root of 9. Jorge, what are you going to get there? 3. Once he gets that 3, Alex, what are we going to do with that 3? Into h. Good. He got this 3 for this problem. He's then taking that answer and plugging it in to h. So now he's finding h of 3. So that is negative 5 plus 3. He's plugging in right here. Okay, negative 5 times 3 plus 3. That's negative 15 plus 3, which is negative 12. The next one says find the domain of f of x. Here is f of x. We did domain yesterday. Remember, every time we do a domain problem, we're asking ourselves 2 questions. Is it a fraction or is it a square root? So, Taylor, is that a fraction? No, it's not a fraction. Is it a square root? Yes, it's a square root. We have this 10 minus x. Remember, it's always dealing with 0. You just need to remember, do I want to be greater than 0 or not equal to 0? What do I not want underneath this? It's greater than or equal to 0. Because what do I not want underneath the square root sign? I don't want negatives. This can't be negative. Okay? And the way we say that, it has to be greater than or equal to 0, which means it's a positive number. So we set it greater than or equal to 0 when it is a square root. Then we're going to solve. So Zoe, what am I going to do to solve here? Minus 10 from both sides. So negative x is greater than or equal to negative 10. Then what, Zoe? Yep, divide by negative 1. And when I divide by negative 1, that changes all of my signs. Okay, emphasis on all of them. Because when I change this to positive x and change this to positive 10, that's going to make this less than or equal to. You got to flip all of your signs when you're dividing by negative 1. That is my domain. The last one says find the domain of g of x. If I'm finding the domain of g of x, that's this equation right here. We ask ourselves the same question every time. Deontay, is that a fraction? Yeah, it's a fraction. Okay. If it weren't, what if it wasn't a fraction or it wasn't a square root? What would it be then? All real numbers, but it's a fraction. With fractions, what do we not want to have happen? What equal to 0? The denominator. The denominator cannot equal 0, so he's going to take that denominator and say that cannot be 0. It is not allowed to be 0. If you get 0 on bottom, that's undefined and that's bad. What am I going to do now to solve this thing? Subtract the 4 over, so x cannot be negative 4. That's his domain. That's what it can't be. You do need to say what it can be. It can be any number in the entire world except x cannot be negative 4. That's what we're doing there. Questions on that one? The next one, it says f of x equals negative 1 over x. Everybody with your arms, show me, what does 1 over x graph look like? Everybody with your arms, show me what's that 1 over x graph look like. Good. That's the reciprocal graph. Normally it would look just like this, but it's not going to look like that. Why not, Michael? Because it's negative. What's that negative going to do to my graph? It's going to flip it. It's going to put it in the other two quadrants. So instead of being in the first and the third quadrant, now my graph is in the second and the fourth quadrant. So it's going to look like this instead. Done. It only flipped. It was the only thing that changed. Graph number 4. Let's go through all the different stuff. Clayton, what's my shape going to be? Parabola. How do you know it's parabola? It's squared. Mark, what else is going to happen to this graph? Right 2, because it's minus 2, and up 5. Good. I'm missing one more thing. It's also going to be flipped. What's going to flip it? The negative sign in front is going to flip. Good. That's all my different characteristics. Let's put them on the graph. So I'm going right 2, up 5. There's my starting point. It's a parabola, and it's flipped. Deja, what's the pattern for a parabola? 1, 3, 5. Is that going to change here? No. Didn't stretch. There's not a number in front. It's just 1, 3, 5. But it is going down because it's flipped. So down 1 over 1. Down 3 over 1. Down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. 5 over 1. Parabola. Parabola. There we go there. Questions? Last one says, find the average rate of change from negative 1 to 3. When we see the phrase average rate of change, Cassidy, what does average rate of change mean? Slope. It means slope. So as soon as I see that, I know eventually I'm going to use this formula, because that is slope formula. That's how we find slope, using slope formula. Okay, in order to do slope formula, what do I need? 2 points. I've got my x values right here, negative 1 and 3. Jasmine, what am I going to do to find my y values? Plug it in. So it's 3 times negative 1 squared minus 3. And down here I'm going to plug in 3 times 3 squared minus 3. Ramon, if I'm doing 3 times negative 1 squared minus 3, which part am I going to do first? Square it. What's negative 1 squared going to get you? 1. And then it's 3 times 1. 3 minus 3, 0. Okay, good. His y value there is 0. If we're doing the other one here. Alondra, what am I going to do first in this equation? Square it. So 3 squared is 9. And then I'm left with this. What am I going to do next? Multiply. 3 times 9 is 27. 27 minus 3, 24. There's that. Okay, we did a pretty nice job on our test with this. I'm not done here. Okay, Isaac, what do I need to do now that I've got my 2 points? Slope form. Yep, we got slope form here. We're going to plug it into that equation. So looking at that, which one of these numbers is y sub 2 going to be? You can do it that way. That's not wrong. I just don't like doing it that way because everybody else is going to do it the other way. X sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. If you got to label them, label them. So in that case, what am I putting on top? 24 minus 0 over 3 minus, if it's 3 minus negative 1, it's plus 1. Good. So it's 24 over 4, which gets you 6. That's the slope, the average rate of change. Questions on that section? Flip the paper over. Do the backside, please. So on the backside, this is continuing what we did on the front side, just in a different manner. Number 6 is the most missed question on the test, and it makes me so sad inside. It makes me very sad. Show me with your arms, what is the shape of number 6 going to be? A chicken? I would call it a line, is what I would call it. It's a line, right? It's a line. Is that x in the denominator? No, that 1/2, yeah, it's a fraction, but it's not on bottom. That's what throws kids off. This is a what here? That negative 1/2 is the what? That's the slope. This is just x. X is by itself, it's y equals something with x. That's a line. Okay, we get so confused by everything else that we start to lose our brains. That negative 1/2 is slope. What is this plus 4 on the end going to do to your graph? Just like all the graphs we do. It moves us up 4, just like we do every time. It's the y-intercept, but it takes us up 4. So on my graph here, I'm going up to 4, and I'm making my first dot, and then I'm doing a slope of negative 1/2. Okay, what am I going to do to make a slope of negative 1/2? Down 1 over 2. When you say over, which way am I going to go? To the right. Down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. There's our graph. It follows the same rules of everything we know. The negative flips it. That's why it's going down, and the 1/2 becomes our slope. It's our stretch number. Okay? It's everything we know about it. You just got to be careful there to not get confused by other stuff. You need to make sure you recognize a line. It's frustrating. The next one. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Always to the right. Rise over run, we always go to the right. At least that's how I'm teaching. It's the best way to remember it. Next one. Negative x cubed minus 3. With your arms, everyone, please show me what an x cubed graph looks like. X cubed graph looks like this, but it's negative. So show me with your arms, what's the negative going to do? It's going to flip it. That right there is going to flip it. Point. Which direction? Everyone, point. Which direction is that negative 3 going to take your graph? Good. It is down. I didn't see any left or right. What would have to be true for it to move left or right? Parentheses. It's not in parentheses, so it takes us down. So that negative 3 takes us down 3. There's our starting point. It's an S-curve graph. It's a broken parabola. Okay, so my pattern is 1, 7. So from there, I'm down 1 over 1 and up 1 over 1. Okay, I'm flipping this thing. So I'm starting there and going that direction. That is what my graph is going to look like. Questions there? Last section, we're doing the graph stuff that we're familiar with. Some of us are familiar with it. Let's talk about domain first. So domain is the x values. It's where do you start on the left side to where you go to the right. Emmanuel, where would you say you started on the left side? Negative 4. He's talking about x values, so he's starting right there. When do you stop going to the right? Infinity. Good. It keeps going forever. This line and arrow indicates it's going that direction forever. So it's negative 4 to infinity. Then we're going to talk about range. If we're talking about range here, Deja, that's y values. What's the lowest y value you use on this graph? Negative 2. There's the bottom of your graph. From negative 2 until when? When do I stop going up? Infinity. I never stop going up because there's an arrow there that tells me I'm going forever. From negative 2 to infinity. Next part talks about increasing. Makai, when do you, what do you think about when you're saying the word increasing? Going up. So at the beginning of this graph, are you going up? From negative 4 until negative 2, that line is going up. So from negative 4 till negative 2, you're increasing. Remember, with increasing, it's always brackets. Good. From negative 4 to negative 2, I'm increasing. Then what happens, Jeremy? Okay, good. All right, good. We jumped there. But that's fine. From 2 until infinity, we're increasing again. So from 2, so that, and from 2 till infinity, I'm increasing. I always like to jump back and forth, but that works. He's got the right spot there. Good. Craig, what about when I'm decreasing? Decreasing means going down. When is that graph going down? -2. From right here, which is at -2, to right there, which is 0. Why did you stop at 0 and not continue all the way down to here? Craig, why did you stop at 0 and not continue all the way down to the valley there? It's not decreasing. From 0 to 1, it's not decreasing. There's one interval. Do you have any other intervals, Craig? From 1 to 2. This section of the graph that right there is also decreasing. What if I would have asked where f of x is less than 0? Okay, or where f of x is negative? What would you be looking for on your graph when f of x is negative, Alexis? If you're negative, f of x means your y values. What are you looking for on your graph to determine when your y values are negative? Somebody help her out. Where are we looking? Below the x-axis. So that would be this spot and this spot here. Okay, but that's not the question being asked. It's talking about increasing or decreasing. The next one talks about where are the local maximums. Okay, when we think of the word maximums, Jasmine, what word are we thinking about? Yes, I would go with just the peaks, but yes, it's the higher points. Samantha, where are my maximums going to be? X equals -2. Good. Anywhere else? Nope, that's it. Right here, that is a maximum point. That goes above it, but I don't care if it goes above it because it's not coming back down. So if it doesn't come back down, it doesn't count. Okay? What about minimums? What minimums do you think here, Michaela? Just kidding. That's not. Why is this not a minimum? It doesn't have a turning point. We didn't change direction. Good. Yep. At x equals 2. Right there is going to be the spot. You could say 2, -2. I wouldn't count you wrong, but it's at 2. Okay. X equals 2. Intercepts is where you cross the x-axis or the y-axis, so it would be x equals -3 right there. X equals -1 right there. Y equals -1 right there. And x equals 3, which is right there. The last question is, what is f of -4? Cassidy, what's f of -4 going to be? -2. That means she's going to where her y value is -4. Here's where her y value is -4, and at -4, where x value is -4, her y value is -2. That's our answer. Questions?